celebrate 50 years of Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye, which feels especially relevant to us in 2020 as we're still fighting for equality and equity for Black Americans. As you know, this is a read along. I'll share a brief, very brief reflection after I've read my selection, but do catch the full reading on the gram at Love as a Kind of Cure. Again, it's Love as a Kind of Cure. Then they had grown, edging into life from the back door, becoming. Everybody in the world was in a position to give them orders. White women said, do this. White children said, give me that. White men said, come here. Black men said, lay down. The only people they need not take orders from were Black children and each other. But they took all of that and recreated in their own image. They ran the houses of white people and knew it. White men beat their men. They cleaned up the blood and went home to receive abuse from the victim. They beat their children with one hand and stole from them with the other. The hands that felled trees also cut umbilical cords. The hands that wrung the necks of chickens and butchered hogs also nudged African violets into bloom. The arms that loaded sheaves, bales, and sacks rocked babies into sleep. They patted biscuits into flaky ovals of innocent and shrouded the dead. They plowed all day and came home to nestle like plums under the limbs of their men. The legs that straddled a mule's back were the same ones that straddled their men's hips. And the difference was all the difference there was. Then they were old, their bodies honed, their odor sour, squatting in a cane field, stooping in a cotton field, kneeling by a riverbank. They had carried a world on their heads. They had given over the lives of their own children and tended their grandchildren. With relief, they wrapped their heads in rags and their breasts in flannel, eased their feet into felt. They were through with lust and lactation, beyond tears and terror. They alone could walk the roads of Mississippi, the lanes of Georgia, the fields of Alabama, unmolested. They were old enough to be irritable when and where they choose, tired enough to look forward to death, disinterested enough to accept the idea of pain while ignoring the presence of pain. They were, in fact, at least free. And the lives of these old Black women were synthesized in their eyes, a puree of tragedy and humor, wickedness and serenity, truth and fantasy. They chatted far into the night. Charlie listened and grew sleepy. The lullaby of grief enveloped him, rocked him, and at last numbed him. In his sleep, the foul odor of an old woman's stool turned into the healthy smell of horse shit, and the voices of the three women were muted into the pleasant notes of a mouth organ. He was aware in his sleep of being curled up in a chair, his hands tucked between his thighs. In a dream, his penis changed into a long hickory stick, and the hands caressing it were the hands of Medea. On a wet Saturday night, before Aunt Jimmy felt strong enough to get out of bed, Essie Foster brought her a peach cobbler. The old lady ate a piece, and the next morning when Charlie went to empty the slop jar, she was dead. Mouth was a slackened O, and her hands, those long fingers with a man's hard nails, having done their laying by, could now be dainty on the sheet. One open eye looked at him as if to say, "Mind how you take hold of that jar, boy." Charlie stared back, unable to move, until a fly settled at the corner of her mouth. He fanned it away angrily, looking back at the eye, and did its bidding. Aunt Jimmy's funeral was the first Charlie had ever attended. A member of the family, one of the bereaved, he was the object of a great deal of attention. The ladies had cleaned the house, aired everything out, notified everybody, and stitched together what looked like a white wedding dress for Aunt Jimmy, a maiden lady, to wear when she met Jesus. They even produced a dark suit, white shirt, and tie for Charlie. The husband of one of them cut his hair. He was enclosed in fastidious tenderness. Nobody talked to him, that is. They treated him like the child he was, never engaging him in serious conversation, but they anticipated wishes he never had. Meals appeared, hot water for the wooden tub, clothes laid out. At the wake, he was allowed to fall asleep, and arms carried him to bed. Only on the third day after the death, the day of the funeral, did he have to share the spotlight. Jimmy's people came from nearby towns and farms, her brother, O.V., his children and his wife, and lots of cousins. But Charlie was still the major figure because he was Jimmy's boy, the last thing she loved and the one who found her. The solitude of the women, the head pats of the men pleased Charlie, and the creamy conversations fascinated him. What she died from? Essie's pie. Don't say. She was doing fine. I saw her the very day before. She said she wanted me to bring her some black thread to patch some things for the boy. I should have known just from her wanting black thread. That was a sign. Sure was. Just like Emma. Remember? She kept asking for thread. Dropped dead that very evening. Yeah, well, she was determined to have it. Kept on reminding me. I told her I had some to home, but nah, she wanted it new. So I sent little June to get some that very morning. She was laying dead. I was just fixing to bring it over, long with a piece of sweet bread. You know how she craved my sweet bread? Sure did. Always bragged on it. She was a good friend to you. I believe it. Well, I had no more mock clothes on when Sally busted into the door hollering about her Charlie hair had been over to Miss Alice saying she was dead. You could have knocked me over, I tell you. Guess Essie feels mighty bad. Oh, Lord, yes. But I told her the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Wasn't her fault none. She makes good peach pies, but she bound to believe it was the pie did it, and I expect she right. Well, she shouldn't worry herself none about that. She was just doing what we all would have done. Yeah, 'cause I was sure wrapping up that sweetbread, and that could have done it too. I doubts that. Sweetbread is pure, but a pie is the worst thing to give anybody ailing. I'm surprised Jimmy didn't know better. If she did, she wouldn't let on. She wouldn't have tried to please. You know how she was, so good. I'll say, did she leave anything? Not even a pocket handkerchief. The house belonged to some white folks in Clarksville. Oh, yeah? I thought she owned it. May have had it one time, but not no more. I hear the insurance folks been down talking to her brother. How much do it come to? $85, I hear. That all? Can she get in the ground on that? Don't see how. When my daddy died last year, this April, it cost $150. Of course, we have to have everything just so. Now, Jimmy's people may all have to chip in. The undertaker that lays out black folks ain't none too cheap. Seems a shame. She been paying on the insurance all her life. Don't I know? Well, what about the boy? What he gonna do? Well, can't nobody find a mama, so Jimmy's brother gonna take him back to his place. They say he got a nice place, inside toilet and everything. That's nice. He seems like a good Christian man, and the boy need a man's hand. What time's the funeral? 2:00. She ought being around by 4. Where's the banquet? I heard Essie wanted it at her house. Nah, it's at Jimmy's. Her brother wanted it so. Well, it'll be a big one. Everybody liked old Jimmy. Sure we'll miss her in the pew. The funeral banquet was a peal of joy at the thunderous beauty of the funeral. It was a street tragedy with spontaneity tucked softly in the corners of a highly formal structure. The deceased was a tragic hero, the survivors the innocent victims. There was the omnipresence of deity, stroke and anti-stroke of the chords of mourners led by the preacher. There was grief over the waste of life, the stunned wonder at the ways of God, and the restoration of order in nature at the graveyard. Thus the banquet was the exaltation, the harmony, the acceptance of physical fragility, joy and termination of misery, laughter, relief, a steep hunger for food. Charlie had not yet fully realized his aunt was dead. Everything was so interesting. Even at the graveyard, he felt nothing but curiosity. And when his turn had come to view the body at the church, he had put his hand out to touch the corpse to see if it were really ice cold like everybody said. But he drew his hand back quickly. Aunt Jimmy looked so private, and it seemed wrong somehow to disturb that privacy. He had trudged back to his pew, dry-eyed amid tearful shrieks and shouts of others, wondering if he should try to cry. Back in his house, he was free to join the gaiety and enjoy what he really felt, a kind of carnival spirit. He ate greedily and felt good enough to try to get to know the cousins. There were some questions, according to the adults, as to whether they were his real cousins or not, since Jimmy's brother, O.V., was only a half-brother, and Charlie's mother had been the daughter of Jimmy's sister, but that sister was from the second marriage of Jimmy's father, and O.V. was from the first marriage. Got it? One of these cousins interested Charlie in particular. He was about 15 or 16 years old. Charlie went outside and found the boy standing with some others near the tub where Aunt Jimmy used to boil her clothes. And he ventured a tentative, "Hey." They responded with another. The 15-year-old named Jake offered Charlie a rolled-up cigarette. Charlie took it, but when he held the cigarette at arm's length and tucked the tip of it into the match flame, instead of putting it in his mouth and drawing on it, they laughed at him. Shamefaced, he threw the cigarette down. He felt it important to do something to reinstate himself with Jake, so when he asked Charlie if he knew any girls, Charlie said sure. All the girls Charlie knew were at the banquet, and he pointed to a cluster of them standing, hanging, draping on the back porch. Darlene, too. Charlie hoped that Jake wouldn't pick her. "Let's get some and walk around," said Jake. The two boys sauntered over to the porch. Charlie didn't know how to begin. Jake wrapped his leg around the rickety porch rail and just sat there, staring off into space as though he had no interest in them at all. He was letting them look him over and guardedly evaluating them in return. The girls pretended they didn't see the boys and kept on chattering. Soon their talk got sharp. The gentle teasing they had been engaged in with each other changed to bitchiness, a serious kind of making fun. That was Jake's clue. The girls were reacting to him. They had gotten a whiff of his manhood and were shivering for a place in his attention. Jake left the porch rail and walked right up to a girl named Suki, the one who had been most bitter in her making fun. "Want to show me round?" He didn't even smile. Charlie held his breath, waiting for Suki to shut Jake up. She was good at that, and well known for her sharp tongue. To his enormous surprise, she readily agreed and even lowered her lashes. Taking courage, Charlie turned to Darlene and said, "Come on, Long. We just going down to the gully." He waited for her to screw up her face and say no, or what for, or some such thing. His feelings about her were mostly fear that she would not like him and fear that she would. His second fear materialized. She smiled and jumped down the 3 leaning steps to join him. Her eyes were full of compassion, and Charlie remembered he was a bereaved. If you want to, she said, but not too far. Mom said we got to leave early, and it's getting dark. So this concludes my portion of reading The Bluest Eyes. And I just wanted to say, though my part didn't touch on Piccola as yet, the book is centered on her as well. And so for all the Piccolas out there, for every little black girl or adolescent girl or teenage girl who feels that she isn't good enough, that she isn't beautiful enough, that she does not fit in, that she aspires to look like someone else, you are beautiful. You are truly, truly beautiful, and you are enough. And if you have to tell yourself that every day, every morning you wake, make sure you do. You are enough. No matter what this world tells you, you are beautiful, and you are exactly who and what you are supposed to be. Thank you.
But I want you to know tonight that we people